A warship sails through Caribbean waters. A shadow passes above Venezuelan F-16s. They roar low over the deck, taunting the Americans. Just weeks earlier, a U.S. strike had sunk a Venezuelan smuggling vessel, killing 11. Now, Caracas is hitting back with a dangerous gamble. Hours later, Washington responds. Stealth F-35s land in Puerto Rico. President Trump renames the Ministry of Defense to the Ministry of War. The world watches in shock. Has Venezuela just made the biggest mistake of its history? We will find out in this video, but before we continue, please like and subscribe to our channel. It is a way of encouraging us to do more videos. Thank you. And this isn't just about two nations. China, Russia, Iran, each has chosen a side. The Caribbean sky is now the front line of a global power struggle. The Caribbean, normally a picture of turquoise waters and sunlit beaches, suddenly became a theater of tension. The calm was shattered when news broke. A U.S. strike on a Venezuelan smuggling vessel had killed 11 people. What had been a routine interdiction operation was instantly transformed into an international crisis. In Caracas, the streets were alive with outrage. Maduro appeared on national television, standing in front of a wall of Venezuelan flags, his voice steady but seething with fury. "This is an act of war," he declared. "They struck our people without provocation. They think they can bully Venezuela, but we will not bow." The message was clear. The Venezuelan government would retaliate, but the method was as much about symbolism as it was about military power. This was a show for the domestic audience, meant to ignite national pride and solidarity, and to signal to Washington that Venezuela was not a paper tiger. The U.S. justified the strike as a measure to protect international law and disrupt illegal operations. Officials argued that the vessel had been transporting arms and contraband that threatened regional stability. But the timing and scale of the strike, which resulted in 11 fatalities, sent a different message internationally. America was willing to use lethal force in its own hemisphere without warning against a sovereign nation. Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran wasted no time in condemning the strike. China called it a blatant imperialist aggression, warning that the U.S. was destabilizing Latin America and setting a dangerous precedent. Russia issued a formal statement, noting that any unilateral military action could escalate into a larger regional conflict, implicitly threatening diplomatic and military consequences. Iran expressed solidarity with Caracas, framing the U.S. strike as part of a pattern of global bullying against nations resisting American influence. Even some Latin American nations, including Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia, publicly denounced Washington's action. The region, already sensitive to U.S. interventions, braced for the fallout. In less than 24 hours, a single strike had transformed the Caribbean from a tranquil maritime corridor into the epicenter of a geopolitical storm. For Maduro, the stakes were high. A misstep could invite a larger U.S. retaliation. But inaction could be politically catastrophic, demonstrating weakness to both domestic opponents and international rivals. The solution? A high-risk demonstration of military capability. Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets, a legacy of U.S. arms programs decades earlier, were scrambled. These jets were no longer just planes. They were instruments of defiance, ready to remind Washington that Venezuela could respond, and that Caracas was willing to escalate if provoked. As the F-16s roared into the skies, Venezuelan state media broadcast their flight over the Caribbean waters near U.S. naval deployments. Footage was carefully curated. Pilots banking sharply, jets gleaming under the sun, engines roaring with menace. Citizens watched from balconies and streets, feeling both pride and fear. Analysts around the world immediately drew parallels to Cold War show-of-force missions, where every maneuver was as much psychological as physical. Soviet bombers buzzing U.S. carriers, American jets probing Soviet airspace. The message was clear. Venezuela was daring the U.S. to react and hoping it would hesitate. Washington watches closely. In the Pentagon, alarms rang. Satellite feeds, drone reconnaissance, and radar arrays tracked the F-16s. Military advisors debated the response. Do they ignore the flyover and risk appearing weak? Do they respond with warnings, risking escalation? Or do they project force immediately, signaling that U.S. dominance in the Caribbean was non-negotiable? The decision would set the tone for the entire standoff. Every choice carried enormous risk. The wrong move could ignite a confrontation no one wanted, but everyone feared. The Caribbean was no longer just a body of water. It had become a stage for a high-stakes chess game between two nations, and the first move had just been played. While the immediate conflict was Caribbean-centered, the implications were global. Analysts in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran all recognized the opportunity. If the U.S. overreacted, it could be painted as an imperial aggressor, weakening its global moral authority. If the U.S. underreacted, it would embolden other nations with anti-American agendas. Even within Latin America, neighbors watched nervously. Colombia and Brazil, while allied with Washington, feared the unpredictable escalation. Cuba and Nicaragua openly sided with Caracas, viewing this as a symbolic stand against U.S. influence. The Caribbean had become a microcosm of global power dynamics, a place where jets, warships, and diplomatic cables carried the weight of the world's eyes. As the Venezuelan F-16s returned to base, engines still echoing across the ocean, the question hung in the air. Was this just a warning, or the spark of something far bigger? The answer would come in hours, as Washington prepared a response that no one would ignore. The sun had barely risen over the Caribbean when Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets streaked across the horizon, their engines screaming like thunder across the waters. It was a calculated spectacle. Not just a test of aerial skill, but a deliberate message aimed straight at Washington. Maduro had personally authorized the flight. In the control room at Maiquetía Air Base, officers monitored the jets as they cut through radar coverage, performing low passes over the U.S. destroyer patrolling international waters. Cameras on deck captured the moment. The sleek F-16s banking sharply, the Venezuelan flag emblazoned on their tails glinting in the morning light. Every maneuver was designed to be provocative and to be seen. The high-stakes provocation. The U.S. immediately labeled it reckless and provocative. Pentagon briefings erupted with alarm. Radar systems tracked the jets approaching dangerously close to the warship. Crew members scrambled to battle stations, while commanders weighed whether to fire warning shots. Washington faced a dilemma: respond aggressively and risk escalation, or allow the display of defiance and appear weak. Meanwhile, Venezuela's state media amplified the flyover as a symbolic victory. Citizens were shown footage of the jets roaring past U.S. vessels, accompanied by triumphant music and patriotic commentary. "Our skies are ours," declared commentator. "The empire cannot intimidate us." This was more than a simple show of force. It was psychological warfare, reminiscent of the Cold War era when Soviet bombers buzzed U.S. carriers in the Pacific, testing responses and nerves. A dangerous gamble. For Venezuela, the stakes were immense. Militarily, F-16s could do little against the full might of a U.S. carrier strike group. But symbolically, this move was intended to demonstrate courage under threat, hoping to rally domestic support and signal to allies like China, Russia, and Iran that Caracas was prepared to stand firm. Analysts immediately debated the potential outcomes. Best case scenario: the U.S. ignores the flyover, avoiding escalation while Venezuela claims a moral victory. Worst case scenario: miscommunication or panic triggers a clash, potentially igniting an armed confrontation. One misjudged maneuver, one misread signal, and the skies over the Caribbean could erupt in a conflict the world is not ready for. Back in Washington, military advisors conducted rapid assessments. The decision was made: project strength without direct confrontation. F-35 stealth fighters were deployed to Puerto Rico, a clear message to Caracas: any further provocation would be met with overwhelming force. The symbolism was not lost on either side. Stationing F-35s near Venezuela sent a message. The U.S. was prepared for action, but still exercising restraint, at least for now. Analysts noted the psychological effect. F-35s were the pinnacle of aerial warfare, capable of striking targets hundreds of miles away, without detection. By landing them in Puerto Rico, Washington projected power directly into Venezuela's backyard. Global observers react. The world watched closely. China, Russia, and Iran quickly issued statements criticizing U.S. overreach, framing the flyover and F-35 deployment as part of a pattern of American aggression. Latin American neighbors were caught in the middle. Cuba and Nicaragua cheered Caracas' boldness. Colombia and Brazil expressed concern, urging caution. International media speculated on whether Venezuela could withstand a full U.S. response. The geopolitical tension escalated, but the drama was not yet visible in headlines. This was a chess match in real time, where each side measured the other's nerve and readiness. The stakes for Venezuela. Inside Venezuela, the flight achieved its immediate goal, rallying the population and sending a signal to international allies. Citizens celebrated the jet's daring maneuvers, while Maduro framed the event as a direct challenge to U.S. hegemony. But the gamble was clear. Venezuela was militarily outmatched. F-16s were fast and capable, but one miscalculation could invite a lethal response from America's advanced stealth and naval assets. For Caracas, the line between symbolic defiance and strategic disaster was razor-thin. The question hung over the Caribbean like a storm cloud. Would this be remembered as Venezuela's bold stand or the first spark of a wider war? As the jets returned to base, the U.S. moved silently but decisively. Satellite feeds monitored every movement. Analysts predicted the next steps, a combination of shows of force, warship repositioning, and cyber surveillance. The stage was set. The Caribbean had transformed from a tranquil backdrop into a volatile arena of international power, where jets, warships, and political statements could easily escalate into open conflict. The flyover was over, but the gamble had just begun. And in this game, one wrong move could light a fuse that no one would be able to control. Washington responded by deploying stealth F-35s to Puerto Rico, which is symbolic and strategic. Pentagon rebrands to the Ministry of War, a chilling throwback to World War II rhetoric. The U.S. message, we're not defending anymore. We're preparing to strike. Shockwaves ripple worldwide. Allies applaud. Rivals rage. And suddenly, the Caribbean isn't just America's backyard. It's the stage for a global showdown. China calls the U.S. move imperialist aggression. Russia warns of escalation, hinting at naval deployments. Iran declares solidarity with Venezuela, offering military advisors. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia voice support for Caracas. Latin America split, Brazil and Colombia quietly back Washington. The lines are drawn, the rhetoric is sharp, and the world wonders, who fires the next shot? This is Venezuela's dilemma, militarily outmatched, but politically emboldened. Venezuela leans on symbolic victories, provocations, alliances, and propaganda. Inside Venezuela, rallies, fiery speeches, David versus Goliath narratives, but cracks show, fuel shortages, internal dissent, military doubts. Can Caracas survive a fight, or is it betting on outside powers to save it? The U.S. cannot allow a precedent. Latin America is its strategic sphere. F-35s are just the start. Carriers, submarines, and rapid response Marines wait in the wings. Washington knows a single misfire could justify a full intervention. Analysts warn. One trigger pull, and the Caribbean could become America's next war front. And history shows, small sparks in America's backyard never stay small. The proxy war fears that may happen. China considers sending naval observers. Russia eyes joint exercises with Venezuela. Iran offers missile technology. The U.S. sees Venezuela not just as Maduro's regime, but as a proxy foothold for America's rivals. If the jets dance over warships today, what flies tomorrow? Russian bombers? Chinese drones? Iranian missiles? Each side entrenches. Miscalculation risk grows. One radar lock, one warning shot, one crash. That's all it takes. World leaders scramble for diplomacy, but neither Washington nor Caracas wants to blink first. The showdown continues, louder, closer, riskier. And as the world watches, one question lingers. Did Venezuela just make the biggest mistake in its history, or is America walking into a trap of its own? The sky over the Caribbean could decide the future of the hemisphere. Was this a reckless provocation, or the spark of something far greater? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Battle Vault, where we uncover the flashpoints shaping tomorrow's wars.